off-page SEO. All right, and again, with this off-page SEO section, there's a little bit of vocabulary to cover as well. All right. The first thing is Google PageRank. So PageRank is essentially a measure of how important Google thinks your site is. It's a 0 to 10 scale, and it's an exponential scale. And that means that roughly going from like a 3 to a 4 is 4 times harder. And then going from a 4 to a 5, that's even another 4 times harder. So it gets harder and harder to move up the scale. So it's not like a 5 is, you know, just a little bit better than a 4. A 5 is actually a lot better than a 4. And a 6 is actually a lot better than a 5. So it gets really, really hard to move up the scale. All right, and PageRank is mostly governed by something called inbound links. And I'm going to talk about inbound links a lot, but these are basically web pages that link to your website. So I'm not talking at all about the links that you put on your website to someplace else. What I'm really talking about here, and what's really, really important, is how many people link to you. So how many people are pointing their web pages toward yours. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about link anchor text. And that is the text in the link to you. So in this case, that blue text, the link, is actually the anchor text of this link. So that's just something to be aware of, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in just a couple minutes because it's super important. All right. Again, remember, 75% of search engine optimization is this off-page factor. And most of the off-page factor is actually governed by links. So I want to talk about links and why they're important. The major thing about links is that they're really, really difficult to fake. So when you think about links, all that on-page SEO stuff that we were talking about earlier, it's really easy to fake that. You can put whatever you want on a certain web page on your site, and it's kind of hard to really know if the page is actually about that stuff or you're really just trying to trick the search engines. But just like in real life, so if you're out there and you're at a business networking event and you're meeting people and you're asking them for recommendations, it's pretty hard to fake those recommendations. So what the search engines have done, and this actually started, sort of Google was the huge proponent of this, and that's sort of the major reasons for Google's success, but there's a bunch of others that do it now as well, is that people, search engines are now looking at links and they're treating them sort of like recommendations. And there's 3 types of recommendations, really. Someone could tell you, hey, I know Mike Volpe. And that's good. And you're like, oh, okay, this guy Mike Volpe sounds like maybe he's good at something. But you don't really have any context around what that recommendation means. You just know that someone sort of voted in favor of Mike Volpe and mentioned my name to you. The second type of recommendation you can get is that Mike Volpe is a marketing expert. So someone that maybe you don't know that well could tell you, oh, Mike Volpe, he's a marketing expert. And that's a little bit better of a recommendation for me because someone told you, they mentioned my name, and they gave you some context around that. And they give you a sense of, okay, well, Mike Volpe, and you want to talk to him when you have a marketing issue. So that's good. And then the final type of recommendation you can get is someone super famous who knows a ton about this subject, like Seth Godin, who's like one of the best marketers in the world, could tell you, you know, if Seth tells you Volpe is a marketing expert, that's really good. And that's really, really good for me, and that recommendation should have a huge amount of weight with you. And so links basically work the same way. So there's 3 different types of links, 3 pieces of information that a link can pass. So one is that if there's just a link, so if someone just has Hubspot.com on another website and that links back to me, that's good. But it doesn't necessarily have any context. The second type of link is that if there's anchor text there, so if the link actually says internet marketing and they link back to me, that's good because it's telling the search engines I'm voting for HubSpot and I'm voting for HubSpot within the context of internet marketing. So HubSpot is good for internet marketing. That's great. And then the final piece is how much does the search engine trust that website? So is it from your personal blog or your personal website, or is it from CNN.com? And if it's from CNN.com or Yahoo.com, that's a really, really powerful link because the search engine is going to give that link a lot more weight. So that's just like Seth Godin telling you that Volpe is a marketing expert. All right, so now we've talked about links and sort of why they're important and how to think about them. So there's this phenomenon called Google bombing. And I don't know if people got this email. It was a few years ago now. It's getting a little dated. But people used to send around this email and say, oh, yeah, this is really funny. Go to Google and search for miserable failure. And the reason it was funny was because the first search result that came up was actually the George Bush web page on the White House government website. And, you know, obviously that page did not have the word miserable failure on it at all. But the reason that Google was ranking it for that search term, miserable failure, was that thousands of bloggers had gotten together and all linked to that web page with the anchor text, miserable failure. So they basically were able to manipulate search results because thousands of them were able to get together. And obviously it was on a less competitive search phrase, so there wasn't anyone trying to rank for miserable failure. And so that's sort of what happened here. So again, it just really sort of shows a testament to the power of links and how important they are. Now, if you go to Google today, what Google's actually done is manually adjusted the search results for that phrase. And so if you go to Google today and search a miserable failure, you don't find George Bush, but you do find a lot of news coverage about this incident. So that's just sort of, you know, sort of something to think about as well. All right, so let's talk about link building tips. So how do I build more links into my website? Because the links are really important. How do I do that? How do I get ranked by building more links? So the first tip is directories. So there's some directories out there like DMOZ that are free. There's some directories like Yahoo and Business.com that are paid. There's a bunch of local directories and things like that. But there's, you know, a whole bunch of directories that are lists of different websites. And if you can get into those directories, that's good because they're going to link back to you. But again, just remember to keep in mind the quality score. So if a website just, you know, doesn't look like it gets a lot of traffic, doesn't look like it would be trustworthy in a search engine's eyes, maybe that's not a link you want as much. That's just something to think about. All right, partners. So if you have a number of companies that maybe resell your product, or companies that you have some sort of a partnership with or things like that, your partners are a great source of links, and they should definitely link to you. And hopefully they'll even link to you with the right anchor text. All right, and then really around links, the other thing to keep in mind is that content really is king. So the better content you have, the more content you have, the more compelling and interesting your content is. Content really drives links on the internet. And so if you have more content that's good, you're going to be more likely to get more links. So what do I mean by content? Well, starting a blog is a great way to join the blogosphere and start to generate more links into your site. People are just much more likely to link to a blog than they are to link to a sort of static and boring corporate website. The second thing you can do is create a tool. People love free tools. And at Hubspot, we've created this tool called Website Grader. It's at websitegrader.com. And it's got almost 50,000 people linking to it now because it's a useful and, you know, and free and valuable tool, and people like to link to things like that. The other thing you can do is create other compelling content like viral videos or cool photos. A lot of this really depends on what your market is. So if you're a jewelry company, maybe you want some really neat photos of, you know, very interesting pieces of jewelry that you've designed. If you're a business consulting, a strategic consulting professional, and you've got a small consulting business, maybe what you want to do is create some really interesting videos that address and give people good advice. So if you're a financial consultant, maybe you want to have, you know, things about, things to think about, you know, for the new 2007 tax code and filing your 2007 taxes. And that's a video that you can put on your website, you can put it on YouTube and things like that, and that can help generate traffic and links as well. So really think about your company and sort of what content makes sense within the context of your company, but better content is definitely going to drive some links. All right, so press releases. So for the companies that are doing press releases can be a great source of content. People tend not to link to press releases that much, but whenever you send out a press release, typically it gets distributed to a whole bunch of other websites. So what you can do is within that press release is actually link back to your own website, which is a really good idea, and you can also do that with the anchor text that you want because it's text that you control. So sending out press releases that are optimized for SEO is really important. And that's sort of a whole topic in and of itself. I've done other webinars about that specific topic, but that's something just to be aware of and sort of, you know, something to really think about. All right, and then social media. So for those of you who are not on LinkedIn or Facebook or getting involved in Yahoo Answers or sites like that, they're a great way to drive additional links back to your site because it's content that's out there. It's other web pages that can link back to you, and there's a number of things that you can do. And that's sort of, again, a whole topic in and of itself, but getting involved in social media and just linking back to your website whenever possible is a good thing. And then we talked a little, I mentioned Yahoo Answers, but even forums and wikis and other things like that, they're all great ways to have additional links back to your site. on, it just takes you a little bit of time to sort of get involved in those things.